The chains had cut her wrists before sunrise. By the time the road bent west out of the trees, the iron had bitten through skin in 3 places, and the blood was beginning to crust under the rope they had tied above her elbows to keep her hands lifted. She was walking. She was bleeding. The men around her did not look at her face. 8 Greystone wolves rode at her flanks, 4 ahead, 4 behind. Her uncle's master-at-arms led the column on a horse that did not like the cold. Behind them came the cart with the rest of the tribute, 3 barrels of wintered ale, a sword that had once belonged to a king nobody alive remembered, the standard of Bright Hollow, which they had lost to Shadowhold 3 weeks before, in a battle Henrik would not name aloud. And under that standard, on a sheet of parchment in her uncle's careful hand, her own name. Idra of Greystone, niece of the Alpha, bound since the age of 3, marked beneath the binding. She had been written below the standard. That had been the thing that broke her in the hall when Henrik read the list. Not the chains, not the sentence, the order of the writing. She came after the ale. The pendant was gone. That was the other thing, the one her body would not stop telling her about. For 19 winters she had worn a flat disc of black iron against her sternum, cold all day no matter how warm the fire. Henrik had hung it on her neck himself, before her mother was even in the ground, and her aunt had taught her how to keep the chain from chafing. She had not seen her own skin under it since she was small. They had taken it off her at the gate of the keep that morning, when they put the wrist chains on, and the place on her chest where it had sat all her life felt wrong now. The skin felt thin. The air felt loud against it. Her head, which had ached most days for as long as she could remember, was clearing. The clearing was worse than the ache had been. She had not known how much of her was bound. The Greystone wolves around her had not spoken since the 2nd mile. There was no need. The march was a ritual older than any of them. A pack pays a tribute. The losing alpha walks his goods to the winning gate. A daughter walks with the goods. Or a niece, if there are no daughters spare. Henrik had a daughter, but Sarah had not been on the list. Sarah had stood beside her father in the hall with her hands folded and her eyes very low. A bird crossed the road and disappeared between 2 pines. The master-at-arms cleared his throat. "Mal, see the banners at the next rise," he said without turning his head. "And you see them, you walk straight, you do not stop, you do not look at any of them. If the rogue speaks to you, you answer with your name and nothing else." She did not answer. He waited a beat, and then said in a different voice, "You will not be quick with you, girl. He will not be kind. Make your peace before the gate. There is no peace inside it." Then he kicked his horse forward, and the line moved. She wanted to ask him why he had said it, whether he had meant it as a warning or as a comfort, or as the last small mercy of a man who had carried her uncle's commands and was tired. She kept her mouth shut. Speech in a tribute march was forbidden. Even her name, when she gave it at the gate, would be given because she was asked for it, not because she had offered it. The rise came. The banners came with it. Shadowhold sat on the shoulder of the mountain like a thing that had grown there. Its walls were the gray of the cliffs they had been carved out of, and the towers rose at angles the Greystone Keep had never managed. From its high posts hung the rogue's standard, a wolf in profile, white on a black field, the eye left open and unfilled so that the cold sky behind the banner became the wolf's eye whenever the wind moved. There were 10 such banners at the gate. There had been 3 at her own keep at her cousin's wedding. The arithmetic of it sat in her stomach. The gate opened before they reached it. There was no crier, no horn. The wood simply moved aside, and a corridor of armed men stood inside it, 2 deep and silent, and at the end of the corridor was a courtyard so wide that the morning light slanted across it in 3 different shades. Idra had time to see the cobbles and the wolf pen along the east wall, and the line of warriors in fur-shouldered leather along the steps, before the master-at-arms put his hand on her shoulder and walked her forward into it. A man stepped out to meet them, tall, dark-haired, beard cut close to the jaw. He wore the same dark leather as the rest, but his bracers were tooled with knotwork that caught the light, and the wolves in the pen behind him turned their heads when he moved. He was not the rogue. The rogue was not yet visible, but every man in the courtyard adjusted his weight by half a step when this one walked, and Idra understood. The second, the beta, the one who held the gate while his alpha decided what to do with what had come through it. Master-at-arms, Henrik of Shadowhold, the master-at-arms said. The formal tone. Master-at-arms, I bring the tribute of Greystone pack, by the terms of Bright Hollow. The goods are on the cart. The girl is... He hesitated. Master-at-arms, on the list. Henrik did not look at the cart. He looked at her. She had been looked at by men her whole life. Men who knew about the binding and crossed themselves. Men who did not know about the binding and only saw a thin, pale girl with dark hair and the cousin of the Alpha's daughter, which was a useful enough thing to marry. Henrik looked at her the way a man looks at a wound that has been bandaged for too long and is about to come undone in his hand. Take the chains off her wrists, he said. The master-at-arms hesitated. Master-at-arms, she is... Take them off. 2 Greystone wolves came forward with the key. Idra heard the lock click and felt the weight fall. Her arms came down. The blood started in her hands again and she swayed, and Henrik did not catch her, but a young pack girl on the steps came down 2 stairs as if too. Henrik raised one finger and the girl stopped. Open her dress at the shoulder, he said. The Greystone master-at-arms went still. Open it, Henrik said again. We have heard there is a marking. We have a right to see what we are accepting. This was the part that Henrik had told her about, in the cold hall the night before. We send you because we owe a tribute. We send you in particular because the rogue has asked in his letter after the rumors. There are rumors of a girl in our line with a sign on her skin. Better that he see what we have suppressed than that he hear what we have hidden. Open your shoulder. Let him see the bound thing. He will keep you or kill you, but he will know we have kept faith. She had said that night, dry and small, You bound it. I do not know what it is. Henrik had said, It is not for you to know. The master-at-arms came around to her side. His hands were not steady, which was new. He took the shoulder of her dress and tore it. The fabric was old and gave easily. The cold air came in. The mark on her chest was the size of a man's open palm, and it was lit. It was not lit the way she had ever seen it lit before. She had glimpsed it perhaps a dozen times in her life, in baths, in the changing of clothes, when the pendant slipped, and it had always been quiet. A faint shape, like a sun on its side, drawn in lines so fine they could have been a scar. It had glowed only the way old gold glowed when held to candlelight. It was not glowing like that now. It was burning. It threw light onto the cobbles. It threw light onto Brunnick's face. It threw a sun-colored glow up under her own jaw and made her own breath visible to her in the cold air, lit from below. The courtyard had gone quiet around her at the tearing of the dress. The courtyard was not quiet now. It was the quiet that lives behind sound. A man on the steps dropped a cup. The wolves in the pen began to rise. A door opened above her, on the keep's upper landing. He came down without hurrying. He wore the fur she had seen on. Brunnick's shoulders, but his was heavier, and his bracers were not knotwork. They were inlaid with the same sun pattern that was burning on her chest, only smaller, in 3 places. He had her coloring almost. Dark hair, dark beard, mouth set. The eyes she could not yet see in the shadow of the morning. He came down the steps and across the courtyard, and he saw her, and he stopped. For a long, long count of breaths, the Rogue Alpha of Shadowhold stood in his own courtyard and looked at her. And Idra of Greystone looked back at him. And the mark on her chest burned between them. And no one moved. Then he came forward. He crossed the last 10 paces. He stood in front of her. He was tall, taller than she had read in the songs, and the songs had said tall. He smelled of wood smoke and something underneath it that was not human. He went down on one knee. He went down on one knee in the middle of his own courtyard, in front of 200 of his own pack, in front of the Greystone master-at-arms with his hand still on her tribute list. And he bowed his head. And he did not speak. The Greystone elder who had ridden the cart came forward, voice shaking. We came to give you our weakest. Vael of Shadowhold did not lift his head. You came to give me your queen, he said. They put her in a room with a fire in it. That was what she remembered, after. The fire. A real one, in a hearth the size of a doorway, with cut wood stacked beside it head high. In her uncle's keep, the fires had been banked in iron baskets and used carefully, and her own chamber had been heated only on the coldest nights, and only by the brazier her aunt had brought from her own room, because Idra's room was not on the warm side of the house. The Shadowhold fire was not warm. It was hot. She stood 3 paces from it, and her cheeks began to sting, and she had not understood until that moment what cold was. A woman had come and helped her wash. The woman had not given her name. She had washed Idra's hands with a cloth and warm water until the dried blood was gone from the wrist cuts, and then she had taken a small clay pot of something pale and worked it into the skin until the cuts stopped weeping. She had been gentle. She had not looked at the mark. She had not looked at the place on Idra's sternum where the pendant had sat. She had washed Idra's hair with her hands, twice through, until the smell of the road was gone from it, and then she had braided it loose at the side of Idra's neck and gone out without a word. There was a dress on the bed. It was plain, undyed wool, the color of old cream, but it was sound, and the seams were straight, and the cloth was thick. There were boots beside it, slightly large. She put them on. Her hands worked. She was still here. Her hands were still hers. A small voice in her head, a voice she did not recognize because it had been bound under iron her whole life and had no practice, said, "This is not how a sacrifice ends." She did not know what it was then. She would know later. She had been in the room a long time by the angle of the light when the door opened and Vael of Shadowhold came in. He had cleaned the courtyard off him. His hair was damp. He had a leather wrap over one wrist where she had not noticed an injury before. He stopped 2 paces from the door and did not come closer. "You will be hungry," he said. "There is food in the hall. You may eat there with the pack or here alone. I have asked them to give you the choice." She looked at him. "Why?" she said. He did not pretend not to understand. "Sit down," he said. "I will sit there." He pointed to a stool by the wall, well away from the bed. "I will tell you what I can. You will not believe most of it. That is all right. You do not have to believe me today." She sat in the chair by the hearth. He sat on the stool. Between them, there was the breadth of the room and the fire. "The mark on your chest," he said. "There is one like it on my back, smaller, older. It came up when I was 11. My grandmother saw it. She had been waiting for it her whole life. She came from a line of women who carried the story. She told me what it meant. She told me what I was supposed to do." "What is it?" Idra said. "The Firstmark," Vael said. "Before the packs were 8, there was one pack. Before the wars, there was one. The line that founded all of us broke into pieces, and the pieces became the keeps. The story says the mark comes once in many generations on a man and a woman who do not yet know each other. 2 halves. When the bearers meet, the mark wakes." He paused. "Mine has been quiet since I was 11, he said. "Until this morning." "You are saying I am saying you are the other half of a thing I have been hunting for 19 years. I am saying I was told when I was a boy that if I did not find you, the packs would tear each other to threads in a war that lasts 100 winters. I am saying I have written to every alpha between the cold sea and the southern grass, and I have been refused, and I have been laughed at, and I have been called rogue because I would not stop. I am saying when the Greystone letter came offering tribute, I asked for a list of every woman of marriageable age in your line, and your uncle did not put your name on it. I had to ask again. I had to ask for the bound ones." She looked at the fire. "He told me he was sending me to die," she said. "I know," Vael said. "He told me you would not be quick." "I know. He told me—" Her voice caught on something it had not caught on in the hall, in the chains, in the road. It caught now in the warm room, with the food smell coming up from below. "He told me the binding was for the pack, that without it I would unmake them, that my mother had asked him before she died to keep me bound, that I have been sick all my life because the mark is wrong and the iron was the only mercy." Vael was quiet a long time. "Your mother did not ask him that," he said finally. "You do not know that." "I know my grandmother knew your mother," he said. "I know they wrote to each other. I have the letters. I will give them to you. I do not know everything he told you, but I know that one thing is false." She put her hands over her face. She did not cry. She had learned very young not to. Henrik had not punished tears exactly. He had simply said, after a certain age, that they were unbecoming in a girl of the line, and her aunt had agreed, and Sarah had agreed, and the maids had agreed, and by the time she was 12, she had stopped. She did not cry now. She sat with her hands over her face and breathed. Vael did not move. When she lowered her hands, she said, "I want to leave." He stood up at once. Then leave. What? The gate is open. It has been open since you came through it. I told them at the threshold this morning. She comes when she comes. She stays if she stays. She goes if she goes. No one will follow you. No one will stop you. I will give you a horse and a cloak and food for 3 days. Greystone is south by the high road. You know it. I have spent 19 years looking for you, he said. I will not keep you in a room. She rose. She walked past him. She walked down the stairs. The pack folk in the corridors and on the steps and at the great doors did not stop her. They moved out of her way. The Shadowhold gate stood open onto the mountain road as it had stood open in the morning, and the cold came in. She stopped on the threshold. The road ran south. She knew it. She had walked it in chains at dawn. Sarah would be at the keep by now. Henrik would be at the long table. She stood in the open gate and could not put her foot across it. She stood there a long time. A boot scuffed behind her. Vael had followed her down. He did not come up beside her. He sat on the cold stone of the threshold, on the inside, with one knee drawn up. I'm not asking you to stay, he said. I am sitting here because if you turn around and come back in, I would like you not to have to do it alone. She sat down on the threshold. They did not touch. She watched the road south. He watched his own hands. After a long while, she said, "Show me the other mark." He pulled his shirt off over his head without ceremony and turned, and there it was, between his shoulder blades, the size of a child's hand, a partial figure of the same sun on its side that had burned on her chest in the courtyard. Half a sigil. The right edge of it was complete. The left edge faded into untouched skin. She put her fingers on it. She did not mean to. Her hand moved. The mark woke under her hand. The skin under her fingers warmed. The mark on her own chest, under the new wool, under the bandaging the woman had wrapped over the worst of the chafe from the dress, answered. It warmed. It glowed through the cloth. Vael's breath went out of him as if he had been struck. She took her hand away. That is the first time it has done that, he said without turning around. In 19 years? Ever. Down in the great hall that night, Brennick walked along the high wall with a young wolf who had not yet earned his second name. Brennick was carrying a torch. The young wolf beside him was carrying nothing, which Brennick had told him to do twice now. She is a Greystone, Brennick said. The wall was cold and the wind was up. Her uncle has hated us for 30 years. Her uncle bound her since she was small. Her uncle wrote her name on the tribute under the ale. And we are to believe she is a prophecy? The mark was real, the young wolf said. The mark was real, Brennick agreed. I have seen the mark. I'm not blind. I am asking, for whom was it real? Maybe she is what she seems. Maybe the binding made her ill, and the prophecy is true and our Alpha is right. Maybe. I have served him since he was 20. I will go where he goes. He stopped walking. But I will tell you this, boy, and only you. If she is a Greystone trick, our Alpha bowed in his own courtyard, in front of 200 wolves, to a planted girl. And the rogues will be a joke from here to the cold sea, and I am not... Started again. I am not having my Alpha be a joke, not on my watch. We watch her. We do not stop her. He has said, Do not stop her. We do not stop her. We watch her. Yes, Beta. Brennick walked on. The wind moved the torch. Down in the courtyard, somewhere below them, a child laughed. Down in the kitchens that same evening, the child laughed because there was a wolf cub in a basket by the bread oven. The cub was 4 weeks old and had been brought in for warmth. The child, Brennick's youngest, Tova, 6 and missing 2 front teeth, had been told not to take the cub out and had not, but was lying on her stomach on the warm flagstones with her face an inch from the basket, telling the cub a long, whispered story about something her father had said about her brothers. Idra had come down for water. She had not been able to sleep. Tova heard her and rolled over, and she did not run, the way the others had moved out of her way in the corridors. She looked up at the marked Greystone girl from the floor and said, "Did you see the cub?" Idra did not know how to answer. The child got up and went to the basket and lifted out the cub and brought it over. "You hold him under the front legs," Tova said. "Not under the belly. Under the belly squeezes him." She put the cub into Idra's hands. The cub was warm. The cub squirmed once and then licked Idra's wrist where the road chains had cut it that morning. Idra laughed. The sound came up out of her throat and surprised her. It was a small laugh, not even a full one, and it stopped almost as soon as it began. Her face hurt. She had not made that shape with her face in a long time. The child watched, satisfied, the way children are satisfied when they have correctly predicted an adult's reaction. "You can hold him until the bread is done," Tova said. "But not after. Ma'am will come for him." Idra held the cub. She was still holding it. Tova was lying on her stomach again, watching. The cub had fallen asleep when the bells started. She put the cub back in the basket, and she was already running. Tova was up and ahead of her, small bare feet slapping on the stones, gone through a side door before Idra had drawn the first cold breath of the corridor. Idra had been told once, by an old huntsman who had served her father, that the children of wolves know what a bell means before they know what a word means. She did not think of it then. She thought it later. Right then she only ran, the way her body told her, toward the bells. The keep was wrong. There were no servants in the corridor. The lamps had been put out. 2 of the rugs along the upper landing had been kicked aside. She came around the corner of the long gallery, and there was a body. Not Shadowhold. Dark cloth. Hood. Hood gone now, head turned at the wrong angle, and across the floor was a smear of dark that was going to need scrubbing in the morning. And beyond the body, the corridor opened into the upper hall, where Vael was fighting 2 men. He was wounded. She did not know where, but there was a slowness in his left side and a long line of red coming through his shirt above the hip. The 2 men knew it. They were working him in turn, one stepping in, one drawing back, the way wolves work a stag in a meadow. She had never held a blade in her life. There was a sword on the floor by the dead man. It had a leather wrap on the handle, and the blade was a hand longer than her arm. She picked it up. The weight was wrong. The weight was very wrong. She had been carrying a pendant of iron all her life, and her arms knew weight. But a sword is not a pendant, and she felt the truth of that in her shoulder the moment she lifted it. She walked into the upper hall. The nearest of the 2 men heard her on the floorboard and turned. She did not think. There was no time to think. She raised the blade the way she had seen Henrik's master-at-arms raise it in the practice yard when Sarah was a child and they had watched from the gallery, and she brought it down. She brought it down hard. She brought it down with both hands and with everything in her shoulders and with the weight of 19 years of iron, and the blade went through the man's collarbone and into his chest, and he made a sound, and he fell. The other turned to Vael. Vael did not let him turn back. Vael's hands closed on the man's wrist and broke it, and then his throat, and then he was on the floor too. There was a third. She heard him on the stair behind her. She turned, lifting the blade again, knowing in the same breath that her arm would not come up in time. He came up the last 3 steps, and his arm was already drawing back, and the knife in his hand was already moving, and she had time, in that moment, to understand that the iron had been off her chest for less than a day, and the body she had been given back was not yet hers. The mark on her chest opened. That was the word for it. After. It opened. Not a flare, not a glow. The sun on its side under the wool of her dress simply opened, the way a door opens, and what came through it was light. The light went out of her in a wave, not in a beam, in a wave, like water from a broken jar, and it took the assassin off his feet, and it took him backward, and it took him through the rail of the gallery, and it took him down to the courtyard, and there was a sound from the stones that meant he had not survived the fall. The light went out of her, and she went out with it. She sat down on the floor very suddenly. The blade fell out of her hand. Vael came across the room, and he knelt beside her, and he did not touch her at first. He looked at her. He looked at the mark, which was still lit, but quieter now, the way a fire is quiet after the kindling is gone. He looked at her face. "You are all right," he said. It was not a question. "I am all right," she said. The keep was full of feet by then. Brennick came up the stairs with 3 wolves behind him, and a torch in his hand, and a knife in his belt that was wet to the hilt. He looked at the body in the corridor, and the body in the hall, and the place in the gallery where the rail was broken, and Idra on the floor with the dim mark glowing through the front of her dress, and he did not speak. He went down on one knee himself. He did it without looking at Vael. He did it for her. After a long count, Vael said, "Bring me the one in the courtyard, the cloak. I want to see the cloak." The cloak had a Greystone sigil sewn under the collar. Brennick spread it on the long table in the great hall as the gray first light came through the high windows. The sigil was small, sewn in with thread that almost matched the lining. A man would not have seen it if he had not been looking. Vael had been looking. 3 of them, Brennick said. 2 are dead inside. The 3rd broke himself on the cobbles. We have the bodies. We have this cloak. We have a knife with a Greystone smith mark. We have an arrow that did not fly because the man with it lost his hand before he loosed it. We have enough. He sent them last night, Vael said. He sent them the moment he learned she was still alive. It looks so, Alpha. Vael looked across the hall at Idra. She was sitting in the long chair by the cold hearth, wrapped in a fur. She had not slept. The mark under the wool was a dim line now, a thin gold thread, like an ember banked. I want to ride, Vael said. You are wounded. I want to ride. With what force, Alpha? All of it that can sit a horse. Brennick was quiet for a moment. Greystone has a wall, he said. Greystone has 200 wolves. We can take it. It will cost. It will cost less if she rides at the front. Brennick turned and looked at her, and he did not argue. He nodded once. He went out to make ready. Vael came to her by the hearth. He sat on the stone of the hearth step. He did not touch her. I am not asking you, he said. I am telling you what we are going to do, and you can come or you can stay. If you stay, I leave half the pack here for you, and you will be safe behind the walls until we come back. If you come, "I come," she said. They rode south at midday. The road was the same road she had walked in chains the morning before. The trees were the same. The bend was the same. The stone marker by the third spring was the same. She rode at the front. She had not asked to. Vael had asked Brunnick to bring up the gray mare with the gentle mouth, and to bring her gloves, and then he had ridden up alongside her, and Brunnick had fallen in behind him, and the rest had fallen in behind Brunnick, and that was the order, and no one questioned it. The mark was on the outside of her dress now. The woman who had bandaged her wrists had cut the wool away above the collarbone and folded the edge down so that the mark sat clean against the cold. It did not glow now in the daylight, but it was visible. It was a thing you could see from a long way off. They came around the last bend, and Greystone Keep stood at the head of the valley. It was smaller than she had remembered. That was the strangest thing. She'd lived inside it 19 years, and she had remembered it as enormous, the way a child remembers the place they were small in, and the keep on its rise above the river was only a keep. Stone, banners, a wall that was good but not high, a gate. A figure stood on the gate. Idra knew her at once. Marn was tall and thin and had Idra's same dark hair, and Marn had been her closest pack-sister since they were 6. Marn had tried, the night before the tribute march, to come into Idra's chamber with a horse and 3 bags of food. Henrik had stopped her at the door. Marn had been kept in the south kitchen under watch all the next morning until the column was 3 miles down the road. Marn was on the gate now. Marn lifted her hand. The gate began to open. Brunnick made a sound behind them, and one of his wolves made a noise like a held breath, and Vael, very quietly, said, "Easy." Marn opened the Greystone gate to them with her own hands. The hall was emptier than it had ever been. The long table sat at the far end of the room, and Henrik sat at the head of it, in his chair, with his hands flat on the wood. He had aged in 3 weeks. The grey at his temples had spread. His hands on the table had a tremor in them that had not been there in the war council before Bright Hollow. Sarah was not in the hall. The pack was not in the hall. 2 of his oldest men stood at the wall, and that was all. The young men who could fight had taken to the woods or the south road rather than meet what was riding in. The hall had judged him before she did. Idra walked the length of the room. She walked in the boots they had given her at Shadowhold, on the floor of the hall she had played on as a child, with the mark on her chest visible in the morning light, and Henrik watched her come and did not stand. She stopped 2 paces from him. "You bound it," she said. "Yes." "You told me my mother asked you to." He did not answer. That was the answer. "My mother and father," she said. "The fever in the 2nd winter." It was not a fever. She had known. She had known in some place she had been unable to look at, but hearing it said out loud was a different thing, and she put her hand on the back of the chair beside her because her knees did something they had not done in the courtyard at Shadowhold and had not done on the gallery at midnight, and were doing now. "Why?" she said. Henrik looked at her for a long time. He was not weeping. He did not look afraid. He looked, more than anything else, tired. "Because if it woke," he said, "we would lose the pack. The prophecy was clear enough. The 2 who carry the Firstmark unmake what has been made. 8 packs, 8 halls, 8 alphas, 8 families. We have been 8 for 200 years. If you and the one like you walked the road together, we would be one again. 1 alpha, 1 hall, 1 family. And that is a thing many men would die before they would let happen." "You killed my mother for it." "Your mother was going to take the binding off you when you turned 6. Your father was going to help her. I asked them not to. They refused. I gave them 3 days to think. They did not change. I gave them 3 more. Then it was done. By you. By me. She looked at him. I am not going to kill you, she said. I want you to know that. I came here thinking I might. I am not going to. Henrik's hand moved. It moved fast. He had been a fighter in his youth, and his hand still knew. He came up out of the chair, and the knife came up out of his sleeve, and he covered the 2 paces between them in a step and a half, and the blade was aimed at her throat, and she did not have time to think, and the mark on her chest did not have time to open. It did not need to. The wolf came through the door behind her so fast she did not see it move. It was very large, and it was very dark, and it had Vael's eyes, and it took her uncle off his feet, and it did not let him stand again. She did not watch. She turned. She walked to the wall, and she put her forehead against the cold stone, and she stood there, and she breathed, and she breathed, and she breathed. When she turned back, Vael was a man again, in the cloak Brunnick had brought down off his horse. He stood between her and what was on the floor. He did not speak. He waited. Marn, Idra said. Marn came in from the doorway. She had been there the whole time. Find Sarah. Tell her the keep is hers if she wants it. Tell her if she does not want it, she may come with us. Tell her I am sorry. Tell her I would not have wanted this either. Tell her I will not come back here unless she sends for me. Where are you going? Marn said. Idra looked at Vael. Home, she said. For now. They rode out at dawn the next day. They did not ride hard. The horses were tired. The men were tired. The pack rode loose along the road, and Vael rode beside her, and Marn rode behind them with 2 bags she had not had to ask anyone to carry. Sarah had not come down to the gate. Sarah had stayed in her father's hall with the door closed. Idra had not knocked. There was nothing she could have said through the door that Sarah was ready to hear, and she knew it, and she let it be. They came up out of the valley as the sun came over the eastern shoulder of the mountain. The road climbed. The trees thinned. There was a place near the high pass where the road bent west, and the whole country opened. The Greystone Valley behind, the Shadowhold ridges ahead, and between them, in the dawn, a long thread of cold mist along the river. They stopped there. Vael got down off his horse and walked to the edge of the road. Idra got down and walked after him. They stood there a while and did not speak. After a long time, she said, I am not what they will want me to be. No, Vael said. There will be others, the other 6 packs. There will be men who do not want 1 alpha and 1 hall and 1 family. There will be men who do what my uncle did, and worse. Yes, the mark will not save me every time. No, he said. It will not. She looked at him. You are not going to lie to me, she said, about any of it. No, he said. I am not. She nodded. The mark on her chest was quiet in the cold light. The mark on his back, under the cloak and the shirt, was also quiet, and she could feel it somehow, the way she could feel the cub against her wrist the night before in the kitchen. A warmth at a distance, a small living thing that knew she was there. They had walked this road 3 times now, once in chains, once in a march, once at dawn. She did not yet know what the next one would be. She did not yet know whether her face would shape into a real laugh again, or how long it would take. She did not yet know whether Sarah would write. She did not yet know whether Marn would stay. She did not yet know whether the bond on Vael's back and her own chest was going to be a thing that saved her or a thing that finished her. And she had begun to suspect that it might be both. The sun came up over the pass. The gray mare lifted her head. Rennet called something from the road behind them. It was time to ride. Idra turned away from the valley and the keep where her mother and father had been told no and not live to see her wake. She walked back to the mare. She put her foot in the stirrup. Vael held the reins for her, and she rode on. If you've stayed with Idra all the way to the high pass, sit with this for a moment before the next thing pulls you away. Most of us have been carrying a binding of some kind, something someone we trusted told us was for our own good, and was not. Not all of us get a courtyard, a mark, a moment where the room goes quiet and the truth becomes visible to everyone. But if there is one small place in your life where you've already begun to take an iron pendant off your own neck, name it tonight, even just to yourself. That is the part of this story that is actually yours.